Now I'd like to introduce today's teacher, Dan Zigmond. Dan is a Zen teacher living in Menlo Park. He's taught at the San Francisco Zen Center, Jikoji Zen Center, and other temples in the Bay Area and beyond. He is also a data scientist who has worked at several local tech companies, including Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Google. He recently published a book on mindfulness, meditation, and work called Buddha's Office, The Ancient Art of Waking Up While Working Well. Dan, thank you so much for leading us today, and I will pass it on to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Allison. Um, and thank you all for joining our virtual sitting. Um, we've been doing this every month through most of the pandemic, and it's so nice that now at last we can start going into the museum in person. It is a wonderful place to visit, and I encourage you all to visit there if you haven't already. It's a wonderful collection, including many Buddhas, as you see behind me. I have a picture of one of the galleries that is a particular favorite of mine. The way this will work this morning is the same structure that we've used before. I'll just give a little bit of explanation of why we're here together and why we're uh, practicing meditation. Um, and then we'll meditate together. We'll do two short meditation periods. But I always like to start by saying something about why we meditate and where this tradition came from. And there are meditation traditions all over the world, but the tradition that I practice and that I studied is the Buddhist tradition that originated in India with the figure that we now know as the Buddha. He was born originally as a prince to a wealthy family, grew up living a very, very privileged life. His parents, like many parents, made an effort to have him avoid any suffering, any hardship, um, and tried to raise him with every possible luxury and comfort. And he was happy for a while, as many of us might be living in a palace surrounded by servants. But at some point, uh, he felt there had to be something more. And so the story is that he snuck out of the palace grounds one day uh, in disguise and went into the local village. And he saw three sights. He saw someone who was sick, which he, I guess, had not seen before, someone who was very old, who was really suffering with old age, and then a funeral procession and saw someone who had died. And seeing these sights, he felt there had to be something more, some more meaning to life than just the kind of fun and games. That uh, realizing that there was so much suffering in the world, and that all of us at some point will be touched by suffering, old age, and death. Um, his life in the palace lost all meaning. And it was at that point that he saw a fourth sight, which was a wandering holy man, as they had in India then and still have in India now, um, living a sort of ascetic existence. Uh, and Buddha, right then and there, decided that was the path for him, that he would leave the palace and try leading the holy life. And so that's exactly what he did. He went back. They say he took one last look at his uh, wife and infant child, and then left the palace, never to return. And so from there, from that life of luxury, he went to the other extreme and led a life of extreme hardship as this wandering ascetic, with no home, no real belongings, um, trying all sorts of really difficult practices, fasting for days and days, weeks even on end. Uh, they say that he got so thin at some point that you could count his ribs from behind, because there was so little flesh left on his body. He even tried holding his breath for long periods, and again they say he held his breath so long that even the gods thought he had passed away. And finally, as he was honestly near death from these such extreme religious practices, he had this next realization, which is that this life of kind of wallowing in suffering couldn't be the answer either. That if he continued on that path, he would just pass away without ever having found the answer to the suffering of sickness, old age, and death. And happily at that moment, a young woman passed by and saw him in this horrible condition on the side of the road and offered him some milk. And that was enough to give him some strength again. And so he went to a nearby tree, what we now know as the Bodhi tree, and vowed to just sit in meditation until he had his answer. And so it's said that he sat all night, and with the sight of the morning star in the morning, he had his great awakening, which is when he became the Buddha, which literally means the awakened one. And that was that our lives needed to be in balance, that we couldn't spend all of our time chasing pleasure, but we also couldn't spend all of our time courting pain, that we had to find this middle way between these extremes, and that the way to find that middle way was literally by just paying attention, by learning to pay attention to what we were doing moment by moment in our lives. And by paying attention to ourselves and the world around us, we could navigate between these two extremes. And so ever since that time, which was about 2,500 years ago, disciples of Buddha have been practicing that same kind of meditation, and for the same purpose of developing what we now tend to refer to as mindfulness, an awareness of ourselves and everything around us, so that we too can find that middle path that avoids extremes and doesn't avoid all suffering, but doesn't wallow in suffering either. That notices suffering when we encounter it, but isn't attached to it, can experience it and then let it go. So people sometimes think that meditation is difficult, and it can be difficult, but it's not difficult because it's complicated, because it's hard to explain. It's actually very easy to explain. The traditional name for this style of meditation in Japan is shikantaza, which literally just means just sitting. And in some sense, that is all that it is just sitting, either by yourself or in a group, and just paying attention to what happens when you do nothing but sit. Traditionally, we would sit in the posture that actually you see from the Buddha up over my shoulder there, cross-legged in what's called the lotus position, often on a cushion to just raise ourselves up a little bit, and then with our hands sitting in our lap in this kind of circular mudra, which you might be able to see there. But that's difficult to do in front of a screen. I'm in fact sitting on a chair, and I assume most of you are too. And that's fine too. The most important thing is just to sit straight, your shoulders back, your back straight, as upright as you can. So it feels like each of your vertebrae are just resting on top of the other without effort. I do recommend you place your hands in your lap, but you can also put them on your thighs, on your knees, even at your side, but just somewhere where they're not going to cause you to slump over one way or the other, and away from devices and distractions. And then if you are on a chair, have your feet flat on the ground. Again, just trying to have your body feel fully supported. In Zen, we often sit with our eyes sort of half opened, usually our gaze lowered about 45 degrees in front of us. But again, that's tricky in front of a screen, which is bright and often has other distractions going on. And so you're welcome to close your eyes if you prefer, and many people find that a bit more natural. And so let's all take that position now. Again, sitting upright, with your back straight, your shoulders back. Maybe just tuck your chin a little bit so your head is just slightly tilted down. And then, as I said, you can either lower your gaze or close your eyes altogether. And what I'll do is I'll ring a bell that I have here 3 times for us to start. That again is our tradition. And when you hear that bell, just listen to the sound of the bell. Listen to it until you can't hear it any longer. And then when you can no longer hear the bell, bring your attention to your breathing. And I'll come in with a little more instruction then. We won't sit long for this first sitting, perhaps just 10 minutes. And then we'll take a little break. You can stretch if you'd like. And then we'll sit again. So let's begin. Now bring your full attention to your breathing. You don't need to breathe in any special way. You don't need to match your breathing to my breathing, or to however you think breathing is supposed to be. Just notice your breathing exactly as it is, giving your full attention to each in-breath and each out-breath. Each in-breath and each out-breath. In-breath, out-breath. It often helps to focus the mind if we narrate our breathing. And so, with each in-breath, you can say to yourself, I am breathing in. And with each out-breath, say to yourself, I am breathing out. I am breathing in. I am breathing out. I am breathing in. breathing out. Breathing in, breathing out. If thoughts arise while you're sitting and breathing, let them arise and then let them go. Notice these thoughts without grasping them. Notice them and release them. Don't beat yourself up for getting distracted. Just allow these thoughts to be a reminder to bring your attention back to the next in-breath and the next out-breath. The next in-breath and the next out-breath. In-breath, out-breath. In-breath, out-breath. a moment, I'll ring the bell once to end our session. Once again, when you hear the bell, just listen to the sound of the bell. Listen to it until you can't hear it any longer. Then take one more in-breath, one more out-breath. And we'll be done. One more in-breath, one more out-breath, and open your eyes. Well, if you had never meditated before, then congratulations on meditating for the first time. And whether you have or haven't meditated before, thanks so much for sitting with me. Let's just take a couple of minutes to stretch, and then we'll sit one more time together. We'll follow the same sort of format. I'll give some instruction as we go, but then also try to leave you some time to just sit in silence. And then when we're done with this second sitting, I'm happy to answer any questions. And as Allison mentioned, you can put questions in the chat, and I'll do my best to answer them. But for now, please get comfortable again, sitting as upright as you can, your back straight, your shoulders back, your hands on your lap, or on your thighs, or at your side, your feet flat on the floor, your chin tucked slightly down. Once again, I'll ring the bell 3 times for us to start. And just listen to the sound of the bell. Listen to it until you can't hear it any longer. And then I'll continue the instructions. Again, bring your full attention to your breathing. Not trying to control your breathing in any way. Not trying to breathe a certain way or to match my breathing. Just notice your breathing exactly as it is, giving your full attention to each in-breath and each out-breath. each in-breath, and each out-breath. Each in-breath, and each out-breath. Try to notice the unique quality of each and every breath. Notice whether each breath is long or short. Notice whether each breath is fast or slow. Notice these qualities without evaluating them, without judging them, without judging yourself. Don't think to yourself, long is better than short. Don't think to yourself, fast is worse than slow. Just notice each breath exactly as it is, giving your full attention to each in-breath and each out-breath. Each in-breath and each out-breath. Without distracting yourself from your breathing, expand your awareness to include the physical sensation of each breath, noticing the physical sensation of each in-breath and each out breath. Each in breath and each out breath. Notice the physical sensation of your chest filling with each in breath and the physical sensation of your chest emptying with each out breath, filling, emptying, filling, emptying. Notice the physical sensation of the air entering your lips or nose with each in breath. And notice the physical sensation of the air leaving your lips and nose with each out breath. Entering, leaving, entering, leaving. Notice the physical sensation of your shoulders, your arms, rising with each in breath. And notice the physical sensation of your shoulders, your arms, falling with each out breath. Rising, falling, rising, falling. Notice the physical sensation of your clothes against your skin, tightening with each in breath. And notice the physical sensation of your clothes against your skin, loosening with each out breath. Tightening, loosening, tightening, loosening. And without distracting yourself from your breathing, allow yourself to experience all these sensations, being aware of your whole body with each in breath and each out breath. Each in breath and each out breath. Each in breath and each out breath. Whatever else you have going on today or this weekend or next week, remember, nothing is more important right now, in this moment, than giving your full attention to this moment of sitting and breathing. Because if you can give your full attention to this moment, you can give your full attention to the next moment, and the moment after that, and the moment after that, and to every moment after that. And giving your full attention to every moment is what it means to be fully awake and fully alive. When you hear me ring the bell one more time, again, listen to the bell. Listen to it until you can't hear it any longer. And then take one more in breath, one more out breath, and we'll be done. One more in breath, one more out breath. And open your eyes. Well, thank you all so much for sitting with me again. It's really nice to be able to sit together even in the midst of these strange times, as hopefully we start to transition back into the world. I'm happy to answer questions if you have any questions or anything you'd like to share. Again, you can put those in the chat and I'll stay online to answer them.
Dan, thank you so much Oh, there's a question. Let's see. How often do you meditate each week?
Um, I recommend, and what I try to do is to meditate each day. Uh, People often ask me, how long they should meditate and when they should meditate, and it's I think it's much more important to establish a regular practice. So find a time that works for you and a length of time that works for you. I meditate first thing in the morning. Um, Other people like to meditate the last thing at night, or sometimes people even like to do it on their lunch break or something like that. Um, Traditionally, in a Zen temple, you'd meditate both first thing in the morning and last thing at night. But find any time that works for you. You can start with as little as 5 minutes a day, work your way up to 10 minutes once you've done that for maybe a week or two. Um, and For many people, that's enough to really feel a real difference, to really feel that the practice is uh, helping you find that middle way. Uh, so that's what I recommend, and what I try to do as well is to meditate each day, find a time that works for you and a length that works for you, and just try to be as consistent as you can.
Dan, another question is, excuse me, are you practicing Zen meditation or mindfulness meditation, and what is the difference?
So my training is in the Zen tradition. Uh, Zen is a school of Buddhism that developed first in China and then moved to Japan and Korea and Vietnam, and ultimately here to the United States. The first Zen monastery outside of Asia is not far from here, down in Carmel Valley, the Tassajara Zen Monastery. Um, uh, what we usually call mindfulness meditation in this country is the tradition that developed in Burma and Thailand, and to some extent Sri Lanka. So if you think about where India is on a map, Zen is from this strain that kind of went north and east, and mindfulness meditation is this strain that sort of went south, although also a little bit east. Um, so the Zen tradition is sometimes called part of the Northern School, and the mindfulness tradition is called the Southern School, um, also known as Mahayana, and for the Zen tradition is part of the Mahayana tradition, and Theravada is the sort of umbrella that the mindfulness tradition is from. But that said, I think in many ways the difference is quite subtle and hard to pick up, and is again less important than just finding a practice that works for you, um, and sticking with it, finding something you can do consistently. In both traditions, both have a long tradition of silent meditation and focus on the breath. And so certainly when you're just getting started, I think for many people they'd be hard pressed to notice much of a difference between learning it, um, in the Zen or the mindfulness tradition.
Okay, so another question is, do you have regular meditation meetings? And I know, Dan, you teach all over the Bay Area, so maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So my home temple is a Jikoji Zen Center, which is a small Zen temple kind of just in the hills above Palo Alto, so on the peninsula. It's a beautiful place. And we are opening to the public starting on June 15th, and we'll be having public meditation every Sunday there. And then I also lead retreats sometimes at Esalen down in Carmel, Big Sur, and have one coming up in July. So you can go to Esalen's website and find out more about that. And Jikoji also has a website. And then I've taught some at the San Francisco Zen Center, which is not far from the Asian Art Museum. And they are also starting the process of reopening, although I don't think they've quite reopened their public meditations yet. Uh, but I would love to see you at any of these places. And in the Bay Area, we are blessed with many places to meditate. Probably every school of Buddhism is represented here in the Bay Area. And if you're calling in from elsewhere, I encourage you to look for local Zen or mindfulness sitting groups and they're some all over the country now.
Great, thank you. So does the way holding hands as a cup signify any meaning?
So I think we're sort of making a bit of a circle, and that circle has a sort of a traditional uh, uh, importance in Zen, and in particular of just kind of, I think, the never-ending cycle of life, as well as a sort of symbol of emptiness, of kind of that blank slate. Um, so it's been a traditional meditation symbol for a long time, and again, you see it on some of these old statues, and then it is also what we use when we meditate. You've probably seen other sorts of you know ways people hold their hands in the Tibetan tradition and other traditions. They sometimes make this symbol, but which is also creating a bit of a circle. And some people just like to rest their hands on their thighs. Again, I think the most important thing is that you try to establish an upright posture, and for that, it's helpful to have your hands, somewhere where they're not going to cause you to slump over one way or the other.
Great. And does yoga type belly breathing help when you
Um,
meditate?
I know some people find it very effective. The tradition in the Zen training that I had was not to try to sort of manipulate your breathing in any way, but to focus on just paying attention to how you're breathing, noticing where the breath goes naturally and the natural pace of it. In other traditions, including some yogic traditions, we do try to breathe in a certain way, and some people do find that very powerful. Um, and so it's certainly something you can try. One of the things Buddha taught all of his students is to pay attention to your own body, your own experience, and so to try things and see how they feel, rather than necessarily trusting any particular teacher or teaching, but to experiment. And so I'd encourage you to try any of these practices that are appealing to you, and see how they feel, and find something that really works for you.
Well, Dan, thank you so much. I really appreciate you leading today's meditation session, and I appreciate everyone for joining us today. Please visit the museum when you can, and have a great weekend.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you all so much for joining me. Have a wonderful weekend.